Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 336, End Battle. Su Hao stood outside the illusory hall. With his hands behind his back, he looked at the Sun and issued a challenge with his eyes. Do you dare to dismount and fight me? However, Sun didn't dare to. He still hugged the neck of the Hell Warhorse and spun around in midair to dodge the attacks of the dazed crow and dumb unicorn. Even though Su Hao had already dismounted. At this moment, a 2vs2 was going on inside the hall in front. The dazed crow transformed into blazing sun and controlled the sky. The dumb unicorn raised monstrous waves and controlled the sea. Of course, since the Sun didn't dare to fight fairly, the dazed crow's flaming slash and the dumb unicorn's infinite water dragon could only be used on the Sun. Some of the aftershock shook, causing ripples to constantly appear on his protective screen. Sun didn't dare to try summoning again, and could only use all his energy to deal with the two sprites in front of him. I just need to persist until the fire god soldier breaks through the illusion palace. Sun pondered. He had already seen through the tactics of the Six God, but he had to admit that this tactic happened to hit his soft spot. At this moment, facing the ubiquitous water dragons, the Hell Warhorse was clumsy. Originally, it was only meant to serve as a mount in this battle. Now that it was restrained, and it needed to expend energy to protect Sun, a sprite trainer, it was only a matter of time before it lost. Sun looked up. In the sky of the hall, a blazing sun was chasing a grey figure, constantly entangling it. Every time the gargoyle dragon wanted to fly towards him, it would be forced back by the blazing sun and endless waves. But Sprite commandeering, synergy! Sun shouted. Warm light blossomed from his body and sprinkled on the gargoyle dragon. In the contract, the 3 elite-level sprites who were trapped contributed a large amount of their power. The other sprites extracted some power from the powerful sprites such as Fire God Soldier and Grand Sun Wheel. In an instant, the gargoyle dragon roared towards the sky. Circles of earth and yellow light spread out, and its aura kept increasing. Its speed also increased by a lot. A layer of energy armor covered its long and hard tail, and it lashed out like a long whip. An explosion erupted. When the tail collided with the blazing red light, with a boom, the blazing sun that was emitting endless light and heat was sent flying dozens of meters away. The grey figure also used the recoil force to quickly pull away from the flaming spirit crow. It didn't return to the Sun's side. Instead, its sharp claws tore through the endless waves and pounced towards the water Kylan. The elements countered each other. Water countered fire and earth countered water. In an instant, Sun had made the best decision. At the same time, in the other halls, the big fat bear wore a bluish-purple battle armor. Its mask was pulled down, and dense thunder arcs covered the surroundings, wrapping itself tightly. Then, it looked at the thunderous pig king. Thunder element battle. Bear remembered its tactics. The moment it stepped into the palace, it immediately let out a roar. Lightning erupted from its body, turning into a thunder ball that smashed towards the thunderous pig king. It probably wants to use the thunder element to fight the thunder element, stall a few main forces, and then attack the Sun himself. On the cliff, a sprite trainer said, "This is Dragon Nation Su Hao's only chance." However, he's already very lucky to have created such an opportunity. Indeed, this reality-resembling illusion actually has the ability to interfere with space. Instructor, is it too late for me to learn illusion now? Hearing this, a certain heavenly king instructor looked as if he also wanted to learn illusion. As they discussed, their eyes never drifted away from the palace. In the hall, the thunderous pig king also used a killer move. The thunder drum in front of its stomach let out a loud thunder sound. Endless thunder elements gathered outside its body. Thunder wrapped around the thunderous pig king's fist that was erected upright. Dazzling lightning covered its entire body. Amidst the crackling thunder, a fist wrapped in endless lightning blasted straight at the thunder ball flying over. It had a power that was expected by the Sprite trainers. It was stronger than the thunder roaring. The cultivation level of the thunderous Pig King is probably not far from pseudo-monarch rank. Thunder roaring shouldn't have used a head-on battle tactic. It should have circled around and delayed. The thunder ball collided with countless thunder arcs and lightning fists. The thunderous Pig King retreated more than 10 meters with a bang. However, the thunder roaring that transformed into a thunder ball flew hundreds of meters away and hit the illusory wall of the palace. The difference was obvious. The Sprite trainers thought to themselves as expected. Then, they pointed out one after another where Su Hao's tactics were wrong. They explained what they would do differently if they were in his situation. Suddenly, someone said, "Don't you think that Thunder Bear is getting fiercer the more it fights?" Suddenly, the thunder ball hit the illusory wall and bounced back. Then, wrapped in waves of lightning, it turned into a cannonball and smashed towards the thunderous Pig King. In just 10 seconds, the two sprites had already clashed 5 times. The thunderous Pig King had only retreated a dozen meters at the start, but now, it retreated again further and further. Its body was already about to collapse. Not only did the huge thunder ball not collapse, it even shone brighter, as if it had absorbed the scattered lightning energy and destructive aura from the collisions. Impossible! It doesn't conform to the energy theorem. Someone's eyes widened. However, in a place they couldn't see, under the mask of the thunder ball, strands of blue lightning marks blossomed on the big fat bear's forehead. Wisps of lightning aura spread out. When they collided head-on, the lightning energy that didn't belong to the big fat bear turned from violent to docile. Under the control of its LV4 thunder element, countless energy gathered into big fat bear's body. The dazzling blue-purple lightning illuminated the hundreds of meters area with a bright glow. Under the Thunder Boar King's astonished gaze, the ball shot out again. Boom! Lightning arcs flashed across the sky, and a fat body more than 2 meters tall was sent flying backward. It hit the wall of the palace with a bang, and its aura was a little unstable. At this moment, after flying hundreds of meters away, the huge thunder ball spun again and kept accelerating as it charged straight at the thunderous Pig King. Thunderous Pig King, what the F***ck? In another hall, Effa was under its fusion state. Blazing white and dark halos spread out from its body. Its half-black and half-white long hair danced in the air. Its whole body seemed to be shrouded in light and darkness. There were also endless light and dark elemental particles revolving around it like a nebula. After stepping into the hall, Effa didn't continue forward. It pressed its whole body against the illusory wall and raised its hands. Ripples appeared in the space in front and on both sides. Bright black meteors poked their heads out of the air. They populated the area, and their auras were directly locked onto the lightning leopard cat, which was currently attacking one of the walls. The leopard cat bathed in lightning let out a meow and turned into a bolt of lightning, shooting out. Half a second later, the eternal night glory concubine stretched out its black-gloved left hand and pressed forward gently. Instantly, bright meteorites flew out, slicing through the air loudly. When the meteorites flew to the side of the lightning leopard, they blossomed with dazzling light and exploded. Meow! Its lightning-like figure alternated between left and right, shooting out Z-shaped trajectories. Even if the flickering meteorite exploded beside it, the lightning leopard cat was able to dodge away before the power of the explosion of light and darkness covered it. It seemed to be as fast as light, extremely agile. However, the eternal night glory concubine didn't blast out all the shining meteorites at once either. The hundreds of meteorites floating in front of it only flew out dozens at once before replenishing rapidly. It maintained this rate and continued to bombard. It wouldn't give the lightning leopard cat a chance to breathe, nor would it give it any chance to approach. This was the opportunity Su Hao had prepared for long ago. Bombardment until the opponent's death. Boom! 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 Effa looked calm. Its white glove and black glove would press down from time to time. Meteorites flew out one after another. Before long, space ripples appeared in the surrounding space. The terrifying power made one's scalp tingle. It was the same for the Eternal Night Glory concubine. It was under tremendous pressure, even in the environment of the elemental lake. At this moment, the lightning leopard cat was still not hit once. It just kept suffering from the aftershock, causing it to suffer only minor injuries. But as long as the leopard cat could catch an opening and get close to its opponent, the leopard cat believed that it could easily kill its opponent. Even without Sun's commands, the lightning leopard cat was still able to make the correct judgment. But the whole hall seemed to be shrinking. Meow. The lightning leopard cat was stunned. In the center of the element lake, in a huge hall, flames raged. A giant flame beast roared and kept hitting the walls of the hall, making the whole hall and the surrounding halls rumble and tremble. It emitted a monstrous aura. And this was the weakened version after Grand Sun Wheel and the Fire God Soldier were separated and the fire power between them couldn't be borrowed. It was still terrifying. At this moment, the Yama Ghost King floated over. 6 ghost shadows with mosaics were carrying a ring in the middle. It was larger than usual and had a diameter of 5 to 6 meters, following behind Ayan. The ring was like a black hole, slowly spinning, swallowing all the light around it. The moment it entered the hall, it was like a whale swallowing water. Countless flames entered the black hole and disappeared. In just a few seconds, half of the sea of flames that filled the entire hall had disappeared. As a result, the size of the flame giant beast also shrank further. Screech! Seeing this, the Grand Sun Wheel scattered even more flames. However, the ring was like a black hole. No matter how much extreme flames it swallowed, there was still no change. Even the giant flame beast showed signs of being swallowed and dismembered as it approached. The Grand Sun Wheel, which was good at spell techniques and fire condensation, was being completely countered in the battle. It wanted to attack with its main body and destroy 6 of the mosaic incarnations that were protecting the ring, but they were constantly blocked by the Yama Ghost King. Shadow energy and flames collided continuously. After just a few seconds of entanglement, the Grand Sun Wheel had no choice but to retreat. As it tried to escape, however, the attractive force emitted by the black ring became even stronger. In just a short few seconds of battle, the Grand Sun Wheel started to look especially sullen. It couldn't even use 30% of its abilities. It was completely at a disadvantage. Ayan, on the other hand, was neither anxious nor impatient. He ate away the sea of fire step by step and weakened the Grand Sun Wheel's strength. It made the sprite trainers of the countless audience on the cliff widen their eyes. The battle indeed showed an obvious suppression, but the situation seemed completely reversed from what they had expected. In the central hall, a battle that received much attention was going on. Fire God Soldier vs Butterfly. As long as Butterfly Fairy loses, the illusion will be removed. Besides, Butterfly Fairy has the wood element attribute, right? With the power of the Fire God Soldier, any random move can easily injure Butterfly Fairy, and even make her lose her battle ability directly. Isn't it a little unwise for Butterfly Fairy to face the Fire God Soldier? Their analysis wasn't bad. But as long as Butterfly dodged all the attacks, none of that would matter. In the palace, the body of the Fire God Soldier was colored in glass. The terrifying aura of the Flame Devil King enveloped it. Every punch it threw carried great power, as if it could penetrate space. However, miss. As its punches were thrown, Butterfly would turn into countless illusion butterflies that danced around. Flames exploded. Butterfly's figure and clone swapped positions. Endless flames enveloped the surrounding area, but the figure of the entire butterfly kept disappearing without a trace. Illusory buildings appeared and were destroyed. It kept trapping the Fire God Soldier, making it angry but helpless. In fact, it couldn't even bombard the walls of the palace. It could only defend and counterattack. The battle lasted for a few minutes. The area of the elemental lake trembled continuously. Some of the aftershocks were restrained in the hall, while others were not, stirring up the wind and clouds. Elemental particles of various colors flew everywhere with a buzzing sound. Flames soared into the sky, thunder rolled, torrential waves surged, black smoke filled the sky, and dazzling light shone. Finally, crack crack boom! As if at a certain critical point, one of the halls in the continuous and enveloping area of the elemental lake couldn't hold on anymore and exploded. And this, like the trigger of a domino, triggered a chain reaction. Around them, whether there were trapped sprites or empty buildings, all of them cracked and collapsed. In the blink of an eye, the grand and illusory cluster of halls disappeared. The entire elemental lake returned to its original appearance. The Sun, who was riding the Hell Warhorse, couldn't help but laugh. The most difficult moment had passed. It was finally his turn to counterattack. Fire God Soldier, Grand Sun Wheel, come back to me, he ordered. But he suddenly realized that something was wrong. At this moment, the gargoyle dragon, which had been protecting him all along, was covered in wounds and its aura was dispirited. The Hell Warhorse was also slightly injured. But he found this normal. Sun still had other sprites in perfect condition. Fire God Soldier and Grand Sun Wheel were where his confidence lay. As long as they could reunite. Sun thought in this way, but after escaping from his previous predicament and finally having the energy to observe the other sprites' states, he discovered. The Thunderous Pig King and the Lightning Leopard Cat were already heavily injured. Grand Sun Wheel was battered and exhausted, its aura dispirited. Only the Fire God Soldier was slightly better. He didn't know that the reason for this was because Butterfly needed to maintain the Illusion Palace and had to expend a lot of extra effort. However, even though the Fire God Soldier was in a relatively good state, as it looked at Su Hao's sprites in front of it who were still strong despite having some injuries, the Sun couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Sun commanded the Hell Warhorse to retreat again and again. He was very confused. Wasn't the battle just now a competition to see who would be the one to hold out the longest? But why did it suddenly become like this? Why were his soldiers all defeated and dispirited? He thought that the aura of the Fire God Soldier would rise again. But the next moment, the illusion imprint erupted. Countless stars fell. Torrential waves rolled up. The huge shadow energy ball appeared again. Countless terrifying attacks landed, and the Fire God Soldier could only emit a final burst of afterglow. Its exhausted body was drowned by the endless energy flow. The glazed flames gradually lost their original glow. Smoke and dust filled the sky. Looking at the miserable-looking Fire God Soldier and the other sprites who were surrounded and beaten up, and then at Su Hao's sprites that gradually surrounded him, Sun shrank his body in fear. No. Chapter 337, Heavenly King Wu is shocked again. After the battle ended, Su Hao returned to the top of the cliff. In front of Su Hao was the Heavenly King Lai Kong, who was surprised and wanted to say something but couldn't say it. The members of the Dragon Nation team opened their mouths wide in shock. And also, the sprite trainers from the various countries, who had already turned into sculptures in the wind and were frozen in their shocked expressions. Even Su Hao. No, Su Hao was used to it. He was used to it. It was just that the young sprite trainers of the Golden Eagle Federation had slightly different expressions. Their faces revealed a kind of disappointment that one felt when one's faith had collapsed. Speaking of which, the Sun is indeed very strong. He proved to be worthy and I almost lost. It was too close. Bai Xiaoming, who was passing by. He looked at the Fire God Soldier, Thunderous Pig King, and the other sprites that were carried away. Then, he looked at Su Hao's energetic sprites who were either playing with their phones or snacking as they got off the field. He couldn't help but reveal a puzzled look. After resting in the City of Glow for 2 days, on the third day, the inheritance slot was officially announced. The scores for the 6 rounds of assessment were based on different weightages. It was said that many heavenly kings quarreled for 2 days before they finally came to a decision. Dragon Nation, Su Hao. Golden Eagle Federation, Adolf. White Bear Nation, Bella. Bull Nation, Antonio. Japanese Nation, Taro. Golden Eagle Federation, Miao Lin. Dragon Nation, Lan Qing. There were a total of 7 people. Even though the Sword God's performance during the Elemental Lake assessment was pretty good. But his assessment scores in the previous few rounds were slightly lower, and his total score was ranked 9th. In the previous batches, the 9th place might also be able to obtain the inheritance slot, but this year, there were only 7 spots. He could only regretfully be eliminated. The only consolation was that Li Jianxian was less than 27 years old this year. He still had one more chance to snatch the inheritance slot at the next Supernova Cup. And the success rate for him was very high. After all, after 3 years, the 7 of them, who had received the inheritance, would no longer be able to participate in the next Supernova Cup. With Li Jiangxuan's martial strength and various abilities, the legacy slot was basically guaranteed for him. If no top-notch geniuses appear in the next 3 years. Li Jianxian, who had just been comforted, suddenly staggered. After pausing for a few seconds, he opened his mouth and asked, "How long since you contracted your sprites?" This question. Su Hao rubbed his chin, his thoughts returning to the summer back then. It's probably been 2.5 years. 1 year from high school and another 1.5 years in university. Su Hao was only a sophomore in university. Su Hao was clearly a newbie sprite trainer, but he was already doing things no one his age should be doing. Li Jianxian. He grunted and turned to leave, but his gait seemed to stagger. Whale Island University, 10,000 Wood Manor. Not long ago, Heavenly King Wu had just destroyed a certain elite team from the Dark Society that attempted to destroy a world entrance in Dongyun Province. There were even 2 Dark Society officers among the team. With pseudo-monarch strength, he chased after it for a long time. After busying himself for a few days, he finally returned to his nest. Heavenly King Wu immediately collapsed on the sofa. After a while, he sat upright again and took out a comb to tidy his hair. The Dark Society must have received intel on several world entrances that weren't recorded in the Union. The New World, or rather, the Spirit Summoning World, was currently estimated to be a continent according to the Union. It was a vast and boundless continent. The positions of the links of each entrance were very far apart, but that was only for ordinary sprite trainers. With the ability of a heavenly king, they could move very freely in the Spirit Summoning World, so flying thousands of miles wasn't impossible. But these people from the Dark Society are crazy, and they must have spies in the Union's higher UPS. After all, a few mere codders wouldn't know the location of the world entrance at all. Heavenly King Wu suspected that even some high-level codders weren't aware of the locations. The entry coordinates were only in the hands of a few people. The Dark Society naturally had the ability to send sprite trainers across the border without being detected. These guys are like cockroaches. They can't be killed and are crazy. Can't they just learn from Thousand Grace Sect and God's Hand and stay out of trouble? Of course, the size of the 2 organizations, the Thousand Grace Sect and God's Hand, wasn't necessarily inferior to the Dark Society. It was just that they didn't cause much trouble, but once there was any commotion, it was usually a big deal. How can we eradicate these terrorist organizations? Heavenly King Wu thought for a moment and tried to come up with an answer. He couldn't think of anything. Therefore, he stopped thinking about it. If he thought too much, it was easy for him to lose his hair, especially at his age. Little Junior, when will you take over my responsibilities? I want to retire and enjoy life. Heavenly King Wu brushed his hair. Speaking of which, at this time, the Supernova Cup should be almost over. I wonder how Little Junior's results are. He took out his cell phone and opened Su Hao's name in the contact list, then shook his head. This is inappropriate. There are many geniuses from various countries in the Supernova Cup. Little Junior must have suffered a blow this time. I shouldn't disturb him. Heavenly King Wu looked through his phone. In the Heavenly King's moments, he found an old friend. This old friend was Heavenly King Lai Kong. After exchanging pleasantries, he asked about Su Hao's situation. Oh, first place. Wait. The first place you're talking about isn't first place in the Provincial League, not first place in Dragon Nation, but first place in the entire Supernova Cup. Heavenly King Wu was a little dumbfounded. The expression on Heavenly King Wu's face changed from O to E and then to what the F***ck in an instant. He had to slow down. Then, he thought about it carefully. He didn't doubt Su Hao's talent and strength. It was also a certainty that he would qualify from the Dragon Nation competition area. Therefore, getting first place in the entire Supernova Cup was very normal, like hell it was. Back then, he had also participated in the Supernova Cup and knew very well what kind of monsters his competitors were. This little junior is a little too strong. Heavenly King Wu thought. Then, he saw another message from Heavenly King Lai Kong. I forgot to tell you, Su Hao didn't just get first place. He crushed the second place, Golden Eagle Federation's prodigy, Sun Sun, in all aspects, including head-on confrontations. You're Su Hao Sr. You should have expected this long ago. There's no need for me to go into too much detail. The contents of the messages echoed in his ears. His thoughts slowly faded. In the 10,000 Wood Manor, a middle-aged man holding a cell phone looked like he was petrified. Tianese Province, the president's office of the Provincial Guild. Heavenly King Yan was browsing the results of the Supernova Cup. He didn't know much about Su Hao's strength. However, he had been paying attention to the situation. Until just now, when the final slot was out, he saw the first name among the 7 inheritors. Heavenly King Yan couldn't help but laugh. Good. 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 He smiled broadly. Although with Su Hao's excellence, it was likely that Su Hao would ever work in the province, but still. Su Hao was still someone from Tianese Province. Heavenly King Yan called his subordinate over. Go, increase the level of protection for Su Hao's parents by another level. Chapter 338, Sprite that had been living for 5,000 years. The slots for the inheritance battle were confirmed. At this point, the entire Supernova Cup came to an end. The Union and Dragon Nation went back to their usual routine. Whale Island University's female seniors and juniors from all levels were still learning, training, and completing missions. They lived repetitively, and many people didn't even know about the existence of the Supernova Cup. Under the lead of Duke Andre, Su Hao and the others arrived at a world entrance at the end of the huge island outside the city of Glow. On the opposite side of this entrance is the Temple of Inheritance. The Grand Duke said. Because the entire entrance was right beside the city of Glow, there wasn't a large base built. It was only marked out as a restricted area. There weren't many Sprite trainers guarding it either, but 1, 2, 3, 3 monarch ranks. On the interface, the 3 monarch sprites belonged to the 3 heavenly kings. Su Hao didn't know their names. The heavenly kings didn't seem to be present, but the 3 monarchs were definitely a force that couldn't be underestimated. Especially since there were many heavenly kings stationed in the city of Glow. As soon as something happened, reinforcements would immediately arrive. Outside the island, there was another line of defense in the sea that belonged to the Union headquarters. It was well defended. Even though Duke Andre was leading the team, the 7 of them still had to go through multiple checks before they were allowed to pass. Su Hao stepped in. In front of him, the environment suddenly changed. It was still the same blue sky and white clouds, but it gave people a feeling that the whole world had become much clearer. It was as if the world had gone from 480p to 1080. Not only was the spiritual energy rich, there seemed to be wisps of mysterious power dissipating, making people feel happy all over. The feeling was similar to what a dark element sprite would feel when entering the darkness. They felt as if they were bathed in holy light. Mr. Andre. An old man with a solemn face and simple clothes like an ascetic greeted them. His gaze swept across, making one's scalp tingle. The two golden body Buddhas following behind the old man didn't release any pressure, but based on their aura and looks, the inheritors knew that they couldn't be underestimated. In fact, Su Hao even saw dozens of sprites hidden around him on the interface. Including the two golden body Buddhas in front of him, there were a total of 10 of them. They were all monarch rank. The defense power was much higher than at the other side of the entrance. The inheritance of the Divine Temple is indeed highly valued by the Union. It's even possible that it's the most valuable ruin controlled by the Union. Su Hao thought about it and was looking forward to it. Duke Andre only sent them to the opposite side of the entrance before handing them to the old man who looked like an ascetic. The old man led them all the way forward, passing through the intersection of many powerful sprites and arriving at a place that looked like a cave entrance. When Su Hao looked in, he found that the hole was 20 to 30 meters wide and more than 10 meters tall. There was a 7-colored light screen, like a curtain, blocking the whole hole, causing them to be unable to see inside. The old monk stopped at the entrance. Inside the light screen is the location of the Temple of Inheritance. People like us can't enter. Only sprite trainers under the age of 30 are qualified to bring their sprites in, and there is a certain quota limit every 3 years. However, the temple has a guardian sprite that will bring you in. He took out a bell from somewhere. Ding! Ding! The sound spread far and wide. Before long, a figure more than 2 meters tall walked out of the 7-colored light screen. Its whole body was made of crystals and was in a humanoid shape, like a mighty general wearing a white crystal suit. It emitted light, making it difficult to look at. This sprite. Su Hao couldn't recall its name for a moment and tried searching in his mind. Only then did he remember that back then, with his level 9 authority, he had seen a sprite in the Union's internet illustration book. Bright Crystal King Knight. It was a sprite with only one form. At that time, there was no detailed information on the illustrated book, but at this moment, Su Hao guessed that the Bright Crystal King Knight must be a special sprite. Then, he opened the interface and took a look. Bright Crystal King Knight. Apart from the name, nothing else was shown. The name probably also appeared only because Su Hao had seen the Union catalog. Otherwise, he could only see the. Are these the ones who will be receiving the inheritance? The Bright Crystal King Knight spoke a special language similar to that of the Duke. It wasn't a language from any of their countries, but everyone could understand it. It was extremely dignified. It also seemed to contain a mysterious power. It's them. I'll have to trouble King Knight. Leave it to me, little guys. Follow me. With that, it stepped into the 7-colored light screen and disappeared. After stepping into the light screen, space changed and was filled with all kinds of strange lights. It seemed to have walked for a period of time in an empty area. Finally, Su Hao moved forward. The space in front of him didn't look like it was in the belly of the mountain. As far as the eye could see, there were lofty and ancient temple halls. There were more than 10 of these halls. Every temple had a different style and color. In front of the halls were an open space, paved with stone slabs, and covered with greenery. There were also stone sculptures with different appearances. Su Hao recognized some of the sprite sculptures, but he couldn't recognize many of them. I was born on one of the stone sculptures. It's just that in the past 5,000 years, apart from myself, no other sprites have been born in the entire temple area. The Bright Crystal King Knight sighed emotionally and waved its hand. Go. Every hall contains a unique inheritance. You and your sprites can choose to enter any of these halls. If you are qualified to receive the inheritance, the hall's inheritance will open. If you aren't qualified, you will be kicked out. In addition, I have to remind you that every sprite and every person can only receive the inheritance from one hall. The longest you can stay in this sacred hall is 7 days before you are expelled. Alright, go. Choose the inheritance you want. After the bright crystal king knight said that, it walked forward, leaving them with an unfathomable back view. And then, the king knight picked up the special tablet placed in front of it on a huge rock and skillfully operated it. It started chuckling. Su Hao caught a glance and noticed that an animation was playing on the tablet. On a closer look, there were also other electronic products such as computers, televisions, speakers, and so on the stone table. The way the Union kept these powerful but homely sprites busy was through entertainment output. At the thought of this, Su Hao shook his finger. At his side, the space distorted slightly. A Union's newest model cell phone poked out from a Yan's shadow space. This was a spare cell phone. In any case, Su Hao didn't lack money, so he bought it and kept it. At this moment, he decisively took it out and gave it to the bright crystal king knight. Su Hao thought about it again. Since he was going to give the king knight a gift, he might as well give it a little bit more. And so, apart from electronic products, Su Hao also gave out many table game cards. The eyes of the bright crystal king knight immediately widened. It was a new ship game that it had never played before. Not far away, Sun and the others, who had just run forward excitedly to receive the inheritance, were stunned. Why are you so proficient at this? Chapter 339, Ordinary Inheritance, High-Level Inheritance. The bright crystal king knight accepted Su Hao's gifts and was a little embarrassed. Although the bright crystal king knight had been born for 5,000 years, it was still a young sprite considering its long lifespan. But the little fellows in front of him were even younger. It originally didn't want to take a gift from a junior, but the gifts were simply too enticing. How about this? I'll tell you about the inheritance of the divine temple. The bright crystal king knight paused. The rules of inheritance in the holy temple are the same for both me and you. I've only received the inheritance once, and that was 5,000 years ago. As for what to expect from the inheritance, I can't say for sure. But I can tell you the general pattern. There are a total of 108 inheritance temples in the entire area of the holy temple. The inheritances of each holy temple are different, and it's very possible that the inheritances obtained in the same holy temple can be very different. For example, in the burning holy temple, you might obtain an inextinguishable flame, or you might get some kind of secret manual that burns your life to stimulate your potential, and so on. The bright crystal king knight paused the animation and continued, the rule is that every person and every sprite can only accept the inheritance from one holy temple. But you have to know that there are actually many differences between the 108 holy temples. The temples near the front are relatively ordinary. The further back you go, the more mysterious the inheritance. But comparatively, the requirements for the inheritance are harsher. At this moment, everyone stopped and listened. Seeing this, the bright crystal king knight said, I know that all of you are outstanding geniuses in the alliance, but the conditions of some holy temples' inheritance are just insanely high. The suggestion I'm giving you is to start from the middle and gradually move forward. Of course, there's no need to try every temple. Follow your instincts. Sometimes, your instincts will help you make the best choice. King Knight spoke for a few minutes. The Union had already told the 7 of them some of the rules, but there were also some details that the Union didn't know. It was because the bright crystal king knight lived here all year round and constantly observed that it was able to gradually conclude some patterns. Just these details alone were very valuable. It was good advice and would help with their selection of inheritances. The others looked at Su Hao with gratitude. Even the Sun, who was a little unwilling to admit defeat and believed that he had only lost because his strategy had gone wrong, had a complicated look on his face. He was unwilling to admit that Su Hao was better than him, but he also felt admiration. At this moment, The bright crystal king knight raised its hand. Wisps of aura were released, making all the sprites' scalps numb. A ball of blazing white light appeared on its crystal-like palm. The ball of light split into 7 and entered Su Hao and Butterfly's 6 sprites with a whoosh. Su Hao felt warm. These light balls contain a trace of my power. It can be of some help to you when you receive the inheritance later, but it won't make a significant difference. It waved its hand. Go. You will need time in order to receive the inheritance. At the very least, you have to begin the inheritance before the 5th day. The Temple of Inheritance occupied a large area. But at the edge of the forest, there was another invisible wall that surrounded the entire Holy Temple area. Su Hao didn't act mindlessly by trying to go past the walls or break the temple halls. The Union must have tried all these. He wanted to focus on choosing the best inheritance. Looking to the left, the pillar in front of the first temple had a pattern of flames burning. Directly above the temple door, there was also a fire-like mark. According to Butterfly, it could sense traces of vast and great power from the flame mark, as if it was capable of burning everything. It's a little similar to the nomological mark of the big fat bear. According to King Knight, the quality of the inheritance of the Holy Temple can be roughly determined from the mark on the door. The more complicated and profound the mark is, the more high-end the inheritance of the Holy Temple is. So. He looked at the Dazed Crow with a questioning look. Did you sense anything? Dazed Crow tilted its head and replied, What are you talking about? Su Hao. Did this crow really have the fire attribute? There was a full week. Su Hao wasn't in a hurry. He walked forward slowly and observed one hall after another. As he approached a temple with 2 lightning overlapping imprints engraved on the door, the big fat bear let out a low growl. Woo, woo. You said you felt something from this temple. According to the bright crystal king knight's observations of the inheritors of the past, the divine temple whose call an individual could sense represented a high compatibility. One would definitely be able to obtain the inheritance from such a divine temple. On the other hand, not feeling something from a temple didn't mean that receiving an inheritance was impossible. That was why one needed to choose more temples before deciding. 1, 2, 3. When Su Hao and his sprites arrived at the middle section of the Holy Temple area, the big fat bear revealed that it had already sensed the calls of the 6 halls. Basically, as long as they passed by a temple related to lightning, the temple would signal to the bear, as if saying, Come on, come here. There were already 3 temples that have called out to the dumb unicorn and the eternal night glory concubine. Ayan only felt 2 calls after all. There were very few sacred halls related to ghost element. As for Dazed Crow, sorry, it didn't even know what it felt like to be called. Gurgle. Su Hao nodded. Butterfly was a little different. It didn't care whether it called or not. Every time it arrived in front of a sacred hall, it would fly near the mark and carefully sense it. After dozens of holy temples, they all had small gains. Gurgle it sighed, expressing its pity. Apart from a few temples, Butterfly was able to sense the imprints of the illusion element, wood element, fire element, water element, and thunder element, as well as a few other special imprints. Fixated on its shortcomings, Butterfly sighed. Su Hao touched its head. You're right. You still have a lot to improve on. Butterfly, _. As Su Hao passed the temples and ventured to the mid-segment, Su Hao found it a little strange that he hadn't seen anyone. Didn't the glorious Crystal King Knight say to start trying from the middle? Have they already found and entered their temples? He thought. Butterfly's hair stood on end. It spun a few rounds like a navigation radar before pointing forward. Gurgle. Do you think they are all attempting the temple in the last segment? That's right. If it were me, I wouldn't be willing to give up without giving it a try either. He thought about it and waited for Butterfly to fly around and memorize the imprints of the sacred halls before arriving at the last segment unhurriedly. Here, the distance between each sacred hall was slightly longer. It seemed a little empty. From afar, he saw the Sun, Bella, and the others. They were staring at some temples. There were also a few less sprites following them. Is he going to receive the inheritance? He thought. A holy temple door in front suddenly opened, and red light shone out. A moment later, the door closed. Outside the door was a slightly dazed fire god soldier. Chapter 340, Entering the Temple. It failed. Clearly, the fire god soldier didn't meet the inheritance requirements for the divine temple. Even among the many sprites, the fire god soldier's strength and aptitude were pretty much at the top. Crack! 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 In a short 10 minutes, the doors of the temples opened one after another. Faint light shone, and in the blink of an eye, sprites appeared in front of the doors. Frozen Mammoth, Grand Sun Wheel, Swordthorn Assassin, etc. They actually all failed. They have already moved from the last segment to the middle segment, but they still aren't good enough to reach the inheritance requirements. Sun's expression was cold. His eyes stared at a certain sacred hall with a red mark like a crossfire engraved on the door. After staring for a long time, he finally made a decision. He strode forward and pressed his hand on the door of the hall made of unknown materials. With a rumbling sound, the door slowly opened. Su Hao moved a few steps and looked over. He could only see a red light seeping out. He couldn't see what was inside the holy temple at all. He looked at Butterfly, who also shook its head. The Sun took a few steps forward, and then the door of the hall slowly closed behind him. All eyes looked over. However, in just 7 to 8 minutes, the door of the hall opened again. A red light spread out, and the figure of the Sun Child appeared outside the door. There was confusion and unwillingness on his face. He reached out again and pressed towards the closed door, but this time, the heavy door didn't move at all. Clearly, to him. Weak rejection.jpg. Ahem, Mr. Adolf, what did you encounter in the temple? Su Hao asked. The others also looked over. The Sun was the first person to come out of the holy temple. Although he was rejected weakly, he probably still had something valuable to say, right? They thought. The corners of the Sun's mouth twitched. After a long while, he squeezed out a sentence. There's nothing. I stayed in the void for a while before I was expelled. Humph, I don't care about this temple. With that, he left directly. When he reached the midpoint of the road, he stopped, paused for a long while, turned around, and walked towards the front. Su Hao. When the others saw this, it also seemed like there was no more excitement to watch. They scattered one after another to search for their respective inheritances. Their strategies were similar. They all had to finish arranging the inheritance of the sprite before considering themselves. The sprites wouldn't be confused when they accepted the inheritance. However, where's Lan Qing? I don't think I saw her. Especially when Su Hao saw that Lan Qing's storm godhound was running around with its tail wagging, he found it to be even stranger. Woof! The big white dog ran past him, suddenly braked and barked a few times. You're saying that your master felt a strong call an hour ago and entered a holy temple and hasn't come out yet? Woof 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 woof. The big white dog kept nodding. Su Hao felt its fur. It was soft and fluffy, and it felt very good to the touch. It was different from the big fat bear. Then, he looked into the distance. The storm godhound was pointing at a navy blue palace. He walked closer and looked over. On the door of the hall, there was a green and spiral-shaped mark, emitting wisps of ethereal and ethereal aura. This was what Butterfly told him. She hasn't been out for an hour. This means that Lan Qing has already received the approval of the Divine Temple and is receiving the inheritance. Su Hao looked at the green palace in front of him. Then, he looked at the fire-red temple in the distance, which was slightly closer to the front and had just rejected the sun of the Sunday. He somewhat understood why the Sun's face had turned black just now. The storm godhound and the other sprites waited outside the green temple. Su Hao continued to walk forward with Butterfly and the others, studying the temples on both sides as if they were window shopping. From time to time, he heard the sound of intelligence points +1. He looked at the interface again. The 108 holy temples all turned into icons and displayed on the map. The icons looked very similar to the marks on the door of the hall. Unfortunately, it was probably because the level of the holy temple was about 100 million points high. He could only get a little bit of information after opening the icons. He could only see. This holy temple represents rebirth through fire. There's no need to try. This mark represents that it is full of light, but for Fu, the balance between the light and darkness is the best. This holy temple mainly passes the inheritance of the thunder creation. It's more compatible with the thunder god armor, and is worth considering. At this moment, as Su Hao got further, the calls that the big fat bear felt also decreased. The situation could probably be described as the temples in the first segment seducing the bear, while the holy temples in the middle were somewhat indifferent to it. By the end, the holy temple couldn't care less about the bear. The bear scratched its head. Sob sob sob. At this moment, a Yan floated out of the shadow and looked to the right. A grayish-black, slightly gloomy hall let out a low cry. You said you felt a strong calling? A lot stronger than the first two. A Yan nodded, its eyes burning. In that case, it seems that the divine temple in front of you has a very, very high compatibility with you. The inheritance you can obtain will definitely be quite good. A Yan nodded again, its expression somewhat impatient. Wisps of aura dissipated from the temple in front of it, as if the doors couldn't wait to be opened. In that case, Su Hao pressed it down. You can note it down first before we continue forward. We still have to see what the other temples have to offer. Temple. After observing all the temples for more than 2 hours, Su Hao still chose to hand a Yan over to the temple with a strong sense of call. The more compatible with the temple one was, the more complete the inheritance one would be able to obtain. There was no need to only focus on top-notch inheritances. Besides, that one was already pretty far back. After sending a Yan, Dazed Crow, and Dumb Unicorn to explore on their own, they also started to try out the holy temples one by one. The Dumb Unicorn went to a temple that probably offered the Cloud Rain inheritance. The holy temple that Fu entered had nothing to do with its attributes. From the marks and interface, it was determined that it was a holy temple that involved yin and yang. It was the most compatible one. The big fat bear eventually went to a lightning holy temple which was relatively cold to it, but still accepted it regardless. Dazed Crow. Go ahead. This was the third temple it had tried. On the door, there was a mark that looked like 2 crossed swords. Those who didn't know might think that this was a metal element holy temple, but Su Hao clearly knew that it wasn't. This is an attributeless holy temple. Like the balance of yin and yang, it's a special inheritance. The Dazed Crow probably has better chances to receive an inheritance in a non-fire element holy temple. After waiting outside for 20 to 30 minutes, the Dazed Crow still didn't appear. Su Hao knew that it was a sure thing. After settling the most troublesome Dazed Crow, Su Hao heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to look at Butterfly. What about you? Gurgle. Butterfly indicated that there was currently no holy temple that seemed especially tempting. It wanted to continue researching and do big data analysis. It wanted to find the best temple before finally deciding. All right. Su Hao was at ease with Butterfly. Butterfly's intelligence was only inferior to him. He didn't need to worry about Butterfly's inheritance. Su Hao started to think about which inheritance he should choose. Along the way, he didn't feel any calls from any divine temple. But this was normal. After all, he was a human. At this moment, sacred halls and imprints flashed across his mind. He eliminated the inheritances of various attributes directly. After thinking for a while, Su Hao opened his eyes and strode towards a temple at the last segment. On the door of the hall was an imprint engraved with rings. He took a deep breath and pressed his palm on the cold door. Instantly, the huge hall door opened with a rumble. Wisps of light shot out. Su Hao stepped in.